Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Be Iconic. I'm your host, Lisa Franklin, and no stranger to any of you is Dr. Udine Harry. Board certified and medical expert, she has been delivering a healthy dose of truth serum to audiences across the country. A true believer in living your best life at any age, she is the author of 3 books, most notably the namesake of this show, Be Iconic. Welcome to the show again, Dr. Harry.
Oh, so good to be back.
So today you wanted to talk a little bit about the multivitamin. And so you were talking about in your practice, you get so many questions from patients about, do multivitamins really work? So I want to just take a step back though, because I think most people don't even know what is a multivitamin.
So a multivitamin, it says exactly what it is a bunch of vitamins together in one capsule. Sometimes, believe it or not, like I would see multivitamins that says you got to take 6 or 8 a day, and it's like, where do you have time to take that many multivitamins? But basically what it is, the ideal multivitamin would have at least minimally the recommended daily allowance of essential vitamins such as your B vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, and it would also have some minerals as well, although some multis do not have minerals. So it basically would give you a little bit of a buffer, if you want to say that.
Okay, so why would a person need the multivitamin, and what is it used for in your body?
Okay, so ideally, in the ideal world, in the ideal situation, I don't know about you, I don't live in an ideal world, but in the ideal world, we would get all of our essential vitamins and minerals from the foods that we eat, ideally, and it will be in the amount that we need it. However, we're not living in an ideal world. The ideal world assumes that we don't have excessive stress. Believe it or not, when you have excessive stress, the body needs extra stuff. The ideal world would assume that all the foods that we grow actually have all the nutrients that we anticipate that they would have. But plants get nutrients from the soil, and our soil has really been becoming a little bit nutrient deficient. So if the soil is nutrient deficient, then the foods that we eat become a little bit more nutrient deficient as well. So we may not get as much as B we might expect it. We may not get as much magnesium that we might expect. And also the environment, because we're living in a little bit of a more polluted environment, it just really demands more of the body. So in the ideal world, we would get it from food, but I can tell you that most of us really need to give ourselves a little bit of a buffer. For example, in times of excessive stress, as we become older, we absorb we just absorb less minerals and vitamins from our foods. I mean, that's just a fact. And then ultimately, some of us may have a tendency towards having lower levels of one thing than the other thing. So genetically speaking, for example, we should be able to absorb and do well with all folic acid from all those green leafy vegetables that we eat. But genetically speaking, some people are not able to really convert that folic acid into something that the body can use. So they have like a little bit of a genetic defect there. So a multivitamin might help with that, because what it can do is actually give them the form that's already easily used by the body.
So now folic acid, why is that important? So
folic acid, oh, so important, because for example, for all of those mamas out there, you know you've been on prenatal vitamins, right? One of the big things about prenatal vitamins is they have a really good amount of folic acid, because it really helps to protect us from neural defects, right? For the baby from neural defects. So basically it's a nerve vitamin. So that is one part of folic acid that we know. But the other part of folic acid is actually really important, because it helps us with those moods. The neurotransmitter that helps us to have enhanced moods also requires folic acid for functioning normally. Our red blood cells require folic acid to function normally. So the body is really heavily dependent on these essential vitamins. And keep in mind, there are a lot of, let's talk a little bit about vitamins. Vitamins can be fat soluble or water soluble. And what that means, the fat soluble ones, they get absorbed better if you eat them with fats. So the fat soluble ones are like vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D. Those are fat soluble. But The other thing about fat soluble is they can be stored in the body. So you can actually store them and have some for later use. With water soluble vitamins, they're really not stored as well. And so the water soluble ones, or the vitamin Bs, for example, are very water soluble. So we usually need to get those in on a regular basis. Like, we don't really build up a huge reserve of those vitamins. So those are a little bit of differences with vitamins.
So now, does it matter, and do the multivitamin that you need, does that adjust or change based on age or gender? Are the needs different? It sounds like they are.
Well, they could be. For example, again, we talked about prenatal vitamins. You see there's a little bit of a change with that recently. I'm very excited to say that prenatal vitamins have added omega-3s, the DHA. So, because we know how important that is for brain development. It didn't have that before, brain development of the embryo. But what the other thing is, it's important because, for example, women, we need more iron, for example, especially menstruating women, right? Because we tend to lose a lot of blood every month. And so we need to replace that. And so oftentimes women's vitamins will really have iron in it. After menopause, you may not necessarily need that amount of iron. You'll find that male vitamins tend not to have iron, especially after they get to be in adulthood, because children also require iron as well. So there's certain nutrients that people need. As we get older, we might need a little bit more calcium. I tell you, almost everybody I know needs some vitamin D. So that's important because we really need to then start focusing on strong bones. Recently, some vitamins have been included antioxidant, especially as we get older, because we really need a little bit of those, because we are generating, the older we get, the little bit more rust that we can produce when our body is going through its normal function. So sometimes vitamins have antioxidants in them.
Wow. All right. So here's the question that everybody has. You know, you hear so much about vitamins. Sometimes you take a vitamin and someone doesn't know if it's really making a difference, or they don't feel a different. Do multivitamins really work? Is there any research that says that these really work?
Okay, so here's the thing. If you're expecting a multivitamin or any kind of supplement to make up the fact that you're eating poorly and not sleeping and not exercising, and you're expecting a multivitamin to give you energy, that's not how it works. I'm here to tell you that that does not work. So basically, what multivitamins might do is prevent you from kind of running low or suboptimal. Okay, so for example, in the average day, I don't know about you, but some days are better than others, and some days I just really don't get the nutrients that I need. I'll be totally honest. And so if I continue multiple of those days, I'm going to start becoming insufficient. I may not get deficient and develop scurvy from lack of vitamin C or things like that, but I may not start functioning at my best, and my body may not start functioning at its best. So vitamins are not necessarily a shot in the arm of energy, but what they do is that they help your body to run more efficiently when you're doing a lot of the things that we know keep us healthy. Now, we're not always going to be able to do that perfectly. That's not life. But ultimately, we want to generally eat well and generally keep moving, and really definitely get a lot of sleep. So what vitamins can do, what multivitamins might be able to do, is support that. So don't expect it to, although some people do feel energized with a multivitamin because maybe they were lacking a particular B that can help with energy production, and so they may feel energized by that. But the general expectation of a multivitamin is that it might stop you from just completely dragging or becoming deficient, and basically keep you at that requirement that you need to keep functioning normally.
Yeah, I think that there's a myth around the fact that if you take one pill, one multivitamin, that on some level that you are getting less of a certain vitamin or need, or filling that need, as opposed to if you took 5 different vitamins, that you're going to get more of everything. Can you talk a little bit about how your body breaks down, and if you double up on everything, what happens to that level, your levels, based on what the person's taking?
Okay, so here's the thing. More is not always more. I know we always feel, well, if 1 is good, my gosh, 6 must be amazing. So I'm just going to take like that much. Well, sometimes what I see, Lisa, in my practice, is that I see someone will come in and they really literally would have a pillowcase full of stuff that they're taking. And of course, I'll take the time and go through all of this stuff. And what the problem with that is, when I ask, okay, why are you taking this or why are you taking that? It's usually because, I read it here, I heard it was good for this. And so ultimately, what you might be doing, because keep in mind, when you start taking multiple things because you've heard about it and not necessarily because it's something that you need, you run the risk of overlapping. So when we're talking about vitamins, let's talk about the fact that we can get too much of something, and too much of something is usually not good. For example, there's been some studies with vitamin B6, for example. Taking huge amount of levels of vitamin 6 can sometimes cause a neuropathy or a numbness in the extremities. And it doesn't happen to a lot of people, but some people sometimes overdo things. And sometimes if you take too much of one thing, you push out something else. And so when we're talking about, let's talk about zinc and copper, for example. They're the yin and yang of each other. The body has a ton of yin and yangs, like a lot. It's because it's always trying to create balance. So when we take, for example, too much of zinc, and that might be a problem now, because everyone thinks, okay, zinc for immunity, right? And so we may start taking a lot of zinc. There might be a couple of problems with that. A couple of problems. Too much zinc actually pushes the immunity the other way. So just the right amount will boost the immunity. Too much pushes it the other way. If you're taking too much of it also, you may then become deficient in copper. Even though you don't need a lot of copper, your body does need some, because copper is, helps with collagen formation and cell, for the skin and things like that. So it's always kind of really trying to find and keep the balance. And just because something is good just because something is sold over the counter. Listen, I'm a proponent of taking, multivitamins or supplements that can support you. But I also always caution about, just because something is sold over the counter doesn't always mean it is for everybody all the time. And so, for example, if you're taking certain medications, if you're taking a blood thinner, for example, you may not want to take a vitamin with a high amount of vitamin K, because it may counteract the blood thinner that you're taking. And there's certain vitamins that can interact with certain things. So if you're taking, for example, a thyroid medication because you have low thyroid function, you don't want to take calcium around that same time as well, because they can interact and make the thyroid medication not work as well. So these are all things that you need to be aware of. So taking a multivitamin for most people is usually pretty okay, because most multis don't have super high dosages. But when you start adding things onto it, that's when you run the risk of then taking too much or an imbalance of something. And that's really not good either.
How do you suggest someone finds out where they fall, what their, where their levels are, and identifying what type of multivitamin they actually need?
Well, that's a good question. If you're a relatively healthy person, you really don't have like much complaints about anything, for example, and you just want to take a multi as precaution because your life is stressful and you're going through some, and you're not eating as well as you should. I think taking a multivitamin that's absorbable, it usually works just fine. If you're actually experiencing some issues, like, I don't know why I'm so tired, after you've gotten checked out by a physician to make sure there's nothing going on, then you might have some nutrient insufficiency. And nutrient insufficiency, honestly, the body does not work super well when you've got a nutrient. It needs those vitamins. Trying to conduct a chemical reaction without the ingredients in it. It's trying to bake a cake without flour. I mean, it needs it. It needs it. And so if you are not getting it, for example, you go, oh, I really hate liver and sardines. So your vitamin D level is going to be crappy if you avoid the sun. If you don't eat a ton of vegetables, stuff like that, your vitamin A levels and your folic acid levels, those may not be really great. If you are a vegetarian or vegan and you're not conscious about your B12 levels can go down, and you might want to keep an eye on that to know if you need to supplement with that. If you've gone through bariatric surgery, those people are on multivitamins for life because the absorption issues are a problem. If you've got a trophic stomach, which is something that happens in the stomach that makes it difficult for you to absorb vitamin B12 and iron and magnesium and stuff like that, then you're going to need to be on those things. So checking the basic ones is usually relatively easy to do. Your physician can just order those. But if you're really looking for an in-depth evaluation to see what's really happening, then you might need to go to a more comprehensive vitamin testing. But not everybody needs that. You know, there's most of the time, most people don't need that. But there's some times when, in order to really understand why someone is not really living optimally, I usually would go to a vitamin testing along with everything else. You know, if I test their thyroid and all those things look really great and everything is looking really good, and they're still not functioning optimally, and they tell me, yes, I have been sleeping. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, I assume that it is because they're saying that. So then I would absolutely look at that just to make sure that we're targeting it, because ultimately, you know, whether you're taking, many people say to me, like, I don't want to take a lot of medications, but also, like, a lot of pills are a lot of pills, right? And so sometimes you don't want to take a lot of pills. There's sometimes when you do have to take some things, but it would be nice to know that it's designed for you. Like, I wouldn't give a high blood pressure medication to somebody who did not have high blood pressure. That would not make any sense, right? So it's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah. It's so funny. You know, I'm a firm believer in doing the test, because I had the test, I don't know, 6 months ago, and it was very eye-opening. I will say to all the ladies here, you know, you think that you're at a certain level, and it's really great to have someone like Dr. Harry walk through your levels and explain some of the things that all of us do not know, all of these different levels and what they are attributed to. Because I think you just keep running and pushing yourself. And so that's a great point. The last question, Dr. Harry, is, I know we don't need to talk actually about certain labels and or brands, I should say, but what multivitamins would you recommend if someone's saying, hey, I just need some help to identify what I should be looking for? Is it liquid versus capsule? If it's, you know, what should they look at when they're identifying what?
Okay, well, the liquid or capsule thing's a personal preference. In terms of, some people can take pills and some people are not good at it. But in terms of absorbability, it could be liquid or capsule. You can make capsules absorbable for sure. The key things, the questions that I would start asking is like, okay, what's your family history? Like, is there anybody, like, you know, with like heart disease or things like that? And I would start thinking you may have an issue with folic acid. So for me, basic multivitamins are this. Okay, so you're looking at it's got the basic multis, the vitamin A, C, E, and there's some vitamins that are natural antioxidants, and A and E and C are antioxidants as well, and then the mineral selenium is an antioxidant. So you want to make sure it has the minerals, you want to make sure it has the vitamins, but the key thing is, keep in mind that many of the multis out there that are, many of them may contain things that the body doesn't absorb very well. And it doesn't break it down very well. And there's some culprits, for example, like magnesium and calcium. They're big ones where it doesn't absorb very well. And so you got to look for something that the body absorbs. So for example, with magnesium, I would look at magnesium glycinate. The body loves anything with a glycine thing on it, and it uses it really well. An oxide, not so much. So it really struggles to absorb that. In terms of the Bs, I usually say especially as we get older, I look at multivitamins and say, okay, are the Bs like really in a user-friendly form? By that meaning that, are they the form that the body can easily use? And unless I'm doing, the genetic testing on everybody, I just assume everybody has difficulty converting some vitamins, and just gonna give them ones that are easy to convert. So by that I mean, and people say, what does that mean? By that I mean, for example, when you're looking at a multivitamin that says folic acid, that's great. I mean, folic acid is a good thing, but some people are not able to make that folic acid into a usable form. So by that, where the body takes it, it adds another group onto it, and then it can put it into a reaction in order to help out the brain and stuff like that. So some people's bodies are not equipped, genetically speaking, to do that. But some multis will already have it done that way. And so the body goes, okay, I don't have to do the work to convert it. Great, I'll just use it. So when you look at folic acid, sometimes you might see that listed folic acid as methyl hydrofolate. And that usually means that that's a form that's more usable to the body. Vitamin B12 is also kind of similar to that. What we call methylation. You don't have to remember all this. It's not a science quiz or anything at the end, but it's just a group that the body puts onto it so that it can make it more usable. And some people need that. As we get older, I tend to recommend those kind of things because it just makes it easier, because we just have problems with conversions and absorption as we get older.
So I have one question. Carolyn wants to know, what about the gummy ones? Are those just as impactful as the...
Well, yeah, here's the thing about the gummy ones. A lot of the gummy ones, to make it gummy, they put some things in there that a lot of people are not recommended. Even people who are not integrative or functional, traditional. There was something that came out, I think it was a few years back, about what they were using in children's gummies was really not that very good for you. It has had some health problems of its own. Now, if you're getting a gummy that they're not adding those things, it's usually fine. But a lot of the times, that's what you got to be aware of. It's like, what's the addition? What are they using to make it gummy? That's the question. Right. And it depends on what they're using to make it gummy.
That's a good point. Such a wealth of information. I know we talked about everything. The last piece, and I don't know if you answered, so I just want to make sure everyone hears, liquid or capsule. Is one better than the other, or no?
No, there's no, it's a preference. It really is a preference. And so I think sometimes there's some people have like a lot of stomach issues. I mean, liquid might be easier for them to tolerate. Liquid is easier than sometimes swallowing a lot of capsules, but you can make capsules just as absorbable as liquid. Okay. It just really becomes a preference at that point.
Okay. All right. Well, we have reached time. Dr. Harry, as always, I want to allow you to just give your one gem for today about multivitamins and women really being diligent about seeking out what they need for their bodies.
Yeah, so here's the thing, like more sometimes it's just more, okay? So taking a basic multi for most people is usually okay. Always speak to your doctor, of course, but most of the time it's usually okay. As a menstruating woman, you want to make sure that you have a multi that has at least the daily required iron in it, and keep multis with iron away from children, because, especially if they're gummies and things like that, you don't want your kids, because too much of iron is toxic. That's definitely a known thing. So the important thing is, try not to compile too many things on top of a multi until you really know what it is that you're addressing, and not necessarily because you read something or your best friend took it and she felt better. You're not your best friend. So a multi is usually okay. When you start compiling things onto it, that might be when you start running into issues.
This is awesome. I hope you guys actually use this as a resource. Come back and look at this video again as you're trying to identify what you need. I just want to point out that this isn't the end of the information that Dr. Harry has to offer. You can definitely go to her private Facebook group called Be Your Own Icon and check that out. We're going to post that in the bottom of the comments, and you also will see it flash across the screen. Number two, if you want to get one-on-one information and connect with Dr. Harry, go to www.drharrymd.com. And that way you can actually set up an appointment, still doing virtual appointments. As you can see, she was been working all day as well, and time to kind of drop in here and drop these nuggets. As we appreciate you, appreciate everything, all the advice that you give, and also just that you are so honest and authentic, and even sharing with us, hey, some days you miss the mark too. Really busy, but I think all of us learn more and more each week. So with that, I am going to, we're going to end and invite you guys back next week. And as always, live, laugh, and be iconic. Thanks again, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.